confusing sometimes looking in the mirror. That's another story. The more we do this, and it gets out on the public airways, the more people ask, or they express some interest in it, and then want to know exactly what it is, or could we be a little more specific? So in line with some of the historical background, etc., blah, blah, blah. Screw an intro, and there it went. Here's the preface. See, so much for a preface. Not to be pseudo-secretive, which is not the correct term. Is this structural? Art is never supposed to be structural. Forgive me for asking. Well, I shouldn't say pseudo-secretive. How about faux-secretive, speciously secretive, vacuously secretive? At any rate, it's not that there's some secretiveness to this, which if I get around to it, would be expected and part of the structure of this sort of operation when it's operating at low speed. But we've been using terms like mystical and transcendental simply because I mean a lot more than ordinary people do and a lot less and something completely different, and I can make up a name. But it is no great secret. As far back as you find literature, you find for a long time it's been translated from other languages that this kind of activity was called the secret work, the great work, the work. That about covers it. But I'm sure it was first called the work, and then probably the great work was the first schism. And I'm sure the next faction was the secret work, like the rest of them don't know. The way, well, that about covers it. But that's all I mean nowadays when I just go ahead and say something about mystical, because I have no reference to any known mystical practice, not picking on any particular one, not referring to anyone, not trying to straighten out any particular one, not trying to reform one. You just got to call it something. Insofar as with a great secret work, how about for a second? That combines from 2 or 3 different cultures and over a period of 3,000 or 4,000 years, I'm putting them together, that this sort of thing's gone on, and it was the great secret work. That about covers it, come to think about it. Of course, then you got to ask yourself, if you've got the real alert mind, is why would they ever let even the term out like the great secret work? So that some people go, ooh. Well, there's several ways to look at it. First off, you already got that one, like, what kind of secret work is it? If somebody says, what do you people keep meeting over there in that cave for? You know, and they say, well, ordinarily we wouldn't say, but it's the great secret work. All right, you already laughed at that. But there's another step. There's always another step sideways, because back then, remember, they didn't have anti-lock brakes. And you can always slide out of a curve and even get more friction and fun. Is it whoever said, all right, it's the great secret work. Now, you already laughed at the apparent irony of that. But the real irony is why, or another level, is why would you tell somebody would go, ooh, and be impressed? No. I was afraid of that. You can overdo humor, can't you? No. You can just do it over people's head, but you can't overdo it. What I was about to get into, to give you some idea that this does have a focus. I was going to point out how myths become mud. To try and keep up, since this is National Alliteration Week. But all of these ideas about there being some kind of great effort going on, you can find that it had its basis, or you can find its reflection anywhere you look, once you understand what it is, and without being unhealthily, if not overly sweaty, metaphorical. You can pick out from the Far East, you can start when they were calling it the Way. You can even find what appears to be in one level some of their first important collections of Confucius, which seems to be civic, quite mundane observations. But all you've got to do, if you've got that turn of mind, is just look off for a second, have a nice unfiltered camel, a little coffee, and look back and you think, he wasn't talking about how to run governments. He was talking about how a man should run his life. You can do that all the way from that to all the great dramas. You can go into, pick up the great books of the Western world. And in a sense, all of them, even those that are fiction, Gulliver's Travels, comedies, satires, are just out and out fiction. If it's been considered by ordinary humanity to be a classic, I accept it. If it was a classic, if it is now considered a contemporary classic, it takes no effort whatsoever to see, if once you have that sort of attitude, that it was a metaphorical statement. Put a little more specifically, you could look at Mark Twain, you could look at Hermann Hesse, you could look at Dante, or the serious ones, I guess, or Erasmus. You could look at Shakespeare, obviously. Well, obviously. Get in focus, sir. Okay. Not just metaphorically, but you can look at it and see, if you wanted to, I could take it apart for you for a second if you can't do it yourself, and go, wait a minute, I never thought about that. And just pick out somebody, Voltaire, Chaucer. That man was involved with this great secret work. That's what that's about. That wasn't just tales about people talking about government or sexual mores. They're talking about a man and a kind of inner development. All the tales of chivalry. It is no effort whatsoever. None. I can do it with comic books. You could take Batman. You could take, it gets a little stickier in a way. It gets a little less apparently efficacious if you start getting real contemporary like cartoons today. But the Ninja Turtles, and I don't really know anything about them, but I can assure you well, see, somebody already laughs, so somebody's already thought about it. I'm sure that you could look at it and it's some version of the King Arthur myths, just to compare it to one thing, without me knowing any more about it. It is always having to do with some sort of quest at its very crudest, such as cartoons. That's why I was hedging it for a second. Contemporary cartoons, if nothing else, it's apparently based upon the struggle between good and evil. And if you extract the very crude religious underpinnings from even that struggle between good and evil, what you're referring to, again, from one view, is this great secret work. It's the progress of man being the good, and it's struggling against the evil. The evil would be that which seems to impede his progress, which would keep him from making some great discovery or executing and realizing finally some great discovery. This thing of the mystical system, the mystical life, the great secret effort, in a sense it is no secret whatsoever, as I've said, by me revealing the mother of all myths, the pater of all paradigms. Do you remember that one? That once everyone knew a secret. Most forgot it, some didn't, the end. Well, that along with my story about that everyone's already had the experience and you blinked. They're tied together. But this kind of great secret work is not all that big of a secret. Religion is obviously very crude and almost of no consequence as far as it offering any real nourishment. But religion is right in your face. Religion would say, well, wait a minute, what you're talking about some mystical secret work or effort that some men have made, hey, don't look any further. Look right here on the corner. Look here at St. Mark's Episcopal Church, or look here at the Holy Bleeding Heart of the Virgin Mary, or whatever the name's, look at our church. Here we are. This is it. This is what you're looking for, which is obviously is not. But the thing is about this being some great secret work. How big a secret? I mean, you look at St. Basil's Cathedral. You look at the Vatican, and you think, what kind of secret? How ostentatious could you be? How obvious could you be? And they're out in the street. They come to your house, ring on the doorbell, join our church. So, in one sense, it is no secret. But also note, for those that enjoy such things, and I probably already made them turn off their TV, There continues to be, right up to this point, the normally referred to now in the Western world as cults, cuckoo groups meeting around. But it says one thing they hold dear is what? Secrecy. Right until the time that they get in a small arms battle with the alcohol and tobacco and tear gas, man. At any rate, it has gone on forever, but beyond now, you see, I've tried to paint you this large screen that there is no doubt religion, in the most obvious form, if you want to take it one end of the spectrum, would claim that, or would agree that, yes, what you're calling great secret work, for you to point out that it's not all that secret, you're right, because here we are, come join up. Except it is not specifically involved with it. It is just one of the great mouthpieces and spokesmen for civilization, and civilization is now the after blink. This is the post blink time. This civilization is that for, remember, once everyone knew a secret, most forgot it, that's civilization. Some didn't. I could have said a few, but a few makes the some who didn't feel too special. They go, a few. Some. But civilization is the post blink, is the post forgetting time. That is, you're supposed to have forgotten it and supposed to not be interested in some great secret work. You're supposed to live your life. That's the main thing you're here for. Do whatever it is you are. If you're fat, fat it up. If you're ugly, ugly it up. If you're beautiful, beautiful it up. If you're a success, success it up. If you're Fred, Fred it up. And if you got it. But even within all of that, from the extreme over here, the very bland, the very common denominator, don't write me, common denominator end of religion being a nice public professed form of the great secret work, which they would say it, trust me. If you never thought about it, those that thought you were involved with some great secret work, I know don't want to think about it, because you'd go, well, yeah, the Pope might say that, but what does he know? Hey, he's the Pope and you're not. He knows that much. He would say, yes, the church is the refuge, if not the cache, if not the source of all great mystical dreams. And most of their time, the story is, if you actually got serious philosophically with them, would be, well, the day sort of passed. We just don't have that many great mystics since, what's his name? Jesus? Yeah, Jesus. And if it was some other religion since, what's his name? The fat guy. Buddha? Yeah, Buddha. So they'd say the day's sort of gone, but they would say, we are what you're looking for. We have the records of it. We have, anyway, this is where you belong. Don't end up with some kind of crackpot group out there that, raising fruitcakes in the middle of the desert out in Oklahoma. And believing, if not in free sex, at least sex you can do on a Discover card. So. There is back to my theatricals, back from the end of the public religion over to, and over here it changes. The religions stay fairly constant. That is, over the recorded history, we've got Shinto, Hindus, the Buddhists, the Christians, the Jews, Muslims. So you've got, that stays kind of steady, just in general, the general name, the general umbrella. And over at this other end, you have as constant an existing group, the name changes, of the would-be secret groups, the cults. Now these over here are the ones who take it the most seriously at ground level, just to start with. They're the ones that take the idea of some great effort, some secret that man's lost, something that he's yet to discover. They take it the most seriously. Now I'm not making yet or pointing out any qualitative judgment yet. I'm just pointing out that they are and continue to be the ones who would insist they take it the most seriously. It's why the group over here, the public at large, looks at them with great, don't anybody write me about this one either, eschewance. Yeah. Hey, if I can do common denominatorism, I can do eschewance or common denominator. That was a song by little Jimmy Dickens. Some of you forgot it. We don't have time to go into 1940 country and western humor, assuming that was funny. It was. Trust me, it was. A little bit, but in the 40s, it was a simpler time. Outside the public eye, outside the mainstream religions, you have always had cults. And Obviously, you know that sometimes the major religions start off as a cult of something else. But we have always had the cults. And the cults, now remember, I'm still talking about just at the ordinary level. We're not talking about anything very serious yet. That is very pragmatic. But it's down at the very small level, at this end, away from the public eye, that you have those that insist on using terms like not just the work, not just a mystical system, but the secret mystical system. If they don't actually say secret, all they got to do is go, the real one. And they mean the secret. Obviously. I mean, all you got to do is think about it a second. Because they've already, by their existence overtly condemns the public side. By their existence, they already, if they say, we are the mystical rose of Christianity, or the mystical bleeding heart of Christianity, they do it to juxtapose themselves, to distinguish themselves from mainstream Christianity. And the only reason you would do it, whether it was that or whether you had a new way of trying to repair automatic transmissions, if you got a new one, what you're doing is condemning the mainstream, the established way, the accepted way. So it is always the cults who are taking it personally, who are trying as best they can to individually put some life into the idea of a secret work, or a secret, an experience, a level of development, or maybe just the mystical experience. Just this one experience of finally. They also say, if given the chance at all, they will immediately condemn the prevailing religion wherever they are. If we were standing in what is now Syria, and we were back 3,000 years ago, they would be condemning whatever the prevailing religion, Zoroastrianism, I guess. Or if we were going back 500 years ago and we were standing in what is now Pakistan, then those groups, if we found one of those secret groups, they would be condemning mainstream Islam. And they would be referring to themselves, I'm making all this, I'm not trying by any means, as you know, to give some sort of academic history of mysticism or theology or anything. So I'm just using it very crudely to give you ideas when I start pulling out real names. But anyway, if we were 300 years ago, 500 years ago, in that part of the Middle East, and it was some secret group, and we didn't know their name yet, and we got in, and we said, well, they would be condemning mainstream established Islam in that area, and they would be what is now, looking back, they refer to it as the Sufis. And they were saying, and you had the same thing, the Kabbalists within Judaism, and you had the would-be mystics in Christianity, and etc., and all religions. And they would be saying, well, the religion, they start out good. And Muhammad understood, we're sure that he was part of this great secret work. There's no doubt about that. But look what happened now. Now it's all organized, and they simply go up there and they go through mechanical rituals. Anybody can get into a mosque. I mean, anybody. My brother got in one. Or worship my brother-in-law. They let him go in. You know, and he doesn't know anything. He has got the sensitivity, of a cow's liver. And so they obviously condemn it. They say what we're doing is trying to revive it. Or we are tied to some thread that comes directly from Muhammad, or what he knew, that has not been lost, and we've stayed outside the mainstream. We are the real Islamic effort. We are, in the true sense of being a Muslim, to be in union with God, or to be a servant of God. That is, we are a servant of the truth. We're the truth seekers. We submit, not to that Allah that they pray to out there, my brother-in-law at the mosque. He doesn't, he wouldn't know Allah if he tripped over him. He wouldn't know mysticism. He wouldn't know intellectual or spiritual subtlety, finesse, if somebody hit him with it. But we still know it. So therefore, as opposed to the public pursuit of religion, this is always considered to be secret. No matter where you are, no matter what the background against which you're trying to play and say, we got it and they don't. It doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter when. It's always that same scenario going on. It's always that same dynamic, that there is a cult outside the mainstream. And of course, there can be more than one. I mean, there's more than one group 500 years ago in that area of the Middle East calling themselves Sufis, or what we call them now. They were in conflict. But at least they were outside the mainstream, and by their mere existence, they're condemning the public, the common aspect of their prevailing religion, of their prevailing idea of what man should be doing and what possibilities he has. Same thing now. I even gave a little background of no great importance, but as far as the United States, which most of us right now, we're here in the United States, even as we do this, if you notice. In a sense, it had no, I was pointing out one time for something else a few weeks back, that in a sense it had less of a tradition because we got less of a historical tradition, except those of us who may be Native American Indians, but the rest of us, we got no real American tradition. 200 years, there's none like the Greeks and the Chinese and et cetera. And so having that kind of limited historical, ground level, city level background, you perforce have a limited mystical, secret work background. But you had you had the so-called transcendental writers in New England in the mid and late 1900s. You had them already picking up and trying to translate, or were translating, some of the Hindu, the Upanishads, and they were trying to show that it had some psychological meaning, that maybe they were, actually it was not a religion, that it might have been actual effort to, inside of one's lifetime, to improve oneself. And then historically you had, at the turn of the century, you had a man come from India, a yoga, that became famous, a yogi, and he became famous, and he's historically considered now to be the harbinger of Indian secret work. And then you had in the 30s, came to the United States, you had another figure from the Middle East, from the Black Sea area, who brought in what was a form now, well, I'm just making it crude, remember, a form of Islamic secret work. And he put his own name of it, and it spawned all sorts of activities. But other than that, it was all imported. It was considered to be very secret, and that split up. I mean, now, you can go out in small towns in Mississippi, and the chances are there is somebody practicing yoga they may be doing at the YMCA. They're not considered to be secret or mystical, but there's probably somebody, if it's a fair-sized city, there would be somebody you will find, maybe a little ad in the paper that there's a little group meeting at somebody's house, and they'll have the word yoga in there somewhere, and if you went there expecting to get exercise, you might find a guy, a native Mississippian, with a turban on his head, and him saying, well, you get past the laugh, and you get in there and you find out his view is, wait a minute, no, we're not that. That's stuff they do at the YMCA on Saturday morning with housewives and my brother-in-law. They call it yoga, that's calisthenics. No, we're talking about a kind of secret work that's been going on for years. In other words, they continue to have to distinguish themselves from the mainstream, whatever it is. And so it's always known, I repeat again, as some sort of secret work. And I'm pointing out it's not secret. And every time it becomes whatever the prevailing cult is, if it gets so big that it's publicly known, then it'll break up if it's going to survive, and somebody will leave that cult. Once it becomes public, and they'll say it got too public, and they'll say, I got the secret of what they were actually doing. You understand? It's almost like a form, not sequentially, riddly, but it's almost like a form of chickens spawning eggs, but going backwards. That it splits, but it keeps going back this way, apparently. They keep saying, no, we're not the chicken. The chicken's too visible. We're going to get back in the shell, and we're not Muslims, we're Sufis. Let's say I jump back 300 years ago. And then the Sufis. They say we're Islamic Bad Sufis, and don't write me because I know Islamic Bad didn't exist back then, but hey, Pakistan didn't exist. So, Lahore, that either probably. What'd you call me? Anyway, it didn't even exist, see? But once, it's like the chicken, here it is, the chicken is visible, it's nice and fat and plump, and it's Islam. And then some people, they try to back away, apparently this way, Christianity, same thing. They try to back off and say, no, we're the egg. That thing's too public. We're the secret work. We're in it. In fact, now I've done that, I bet somebody wish they'd thought about that they called it, we're the egg. The secret egg. The great. But anyway, and then the egg, the Sufis, the Lahore secret Sufi group of 720 AD, they consider themselves the egg vis-a-vis the chicken up here that's too visible. But if it gets so visible that anybody, if you just show into town, you just blow in from Omaha into Lahore, and you go, has anybody ever heard of the Lahore secret Sufi group? And you stop a camel driver on the street, and he goes, oh yes, and that house down there? Hey, it's no longer much of a Lahore secret Sufi group. So pretty soon, somebody from that group will go, "Nuh-uh, this thing's become its own public chicken," and so they try to go back further and go, "We are the new, or the real, the secret Lahore Sufi group," and it keeps trying to go back this way, which is simply tied to the idea that we have lost paradise again, and that we should be trying to get back to the Garden of Eden, trying to get back to the Godhead. Which also is how all the myths normally end up, that the whole point of having a mystical experience, by most descriptions that are fairly well known or that become public at all, is always some way that we're trying to get in touch again with God. That our soul is trying to get in touch again with the seed of the universe. But back to the myths and what happens to them. Myths become mud. That is, the information that assume, let's just give it this for the sake of conversation. At one time, every religion, at the time now, you got to understand, at the time and the place, Muhammad, Moses, Abraham, Confucius, understood in some singular way at that time and that place, he did individually, any of those people, what the great secret was. They did not blink at life during their time and place, and they grew up and learned how to appreciate it in adulthood, which, at any rate, they were true mystics at the time and place, let's say. So, whatever they said, assuming that the records are even correct, that doesn't matter, but whatever they said, if it was still remembered for a while and was supposed, people tried to use it and they turned it into rituals, they turned it into symbols, they had no other choice. That was all they could do after the fact. But then what would have been, or let's assume was, useful information at one particular time and place that was a myth became something else. And my bow to alliteration was how myths become mud. All right, it happens like this. A couple of nights ago I pointed out that there were two kinds of literature as it ends up. And literature just being a kind of, either if you want to look at it as history / current telling of the human condition of what's going on. The two kinds of literature, the two flavors are the ones that simply detail what man is. Notwithstanding the fact that you could read Shakespeare at two levels. Like I pointed out, you could read anything metaphorically once you see it. Because even dunderheads are metaphorical. They just don't know it. Some drunken bricklayer from Utah may only have one metaphor in him for his whole life. But if you listen long enough, he'll say it, and you go, that could be the stupidest thing you ever heard. Well, as stupid as your brother-in-law would do. Just run-of-the-mill stupid, but it might go, I never thought about it that way. And it's not what he said. That wasn't important. You could look at Shakespeare, for instance, just among many. Just the first word that came to mind. You could look at the literature of that as being a detailing of the human condition. Greed, the breakdown of family relationships, the power of the lure of fame, just anything you want to call it. I'm not trying to give a breakdown of literature. Most movies, almost all literature, all human entertainment, movies nowadays, novels, two possibilities. One simply details, and oftentimes it's given credit. It's given awards like, this is the best telling of the violent life in our inner cities this year. Therefore, let's hand it to this movie. The movie may turn your stomach. It's nothing but blood and guts. Or it could be, here is the final telling of what actually happened in the trenches in World War II. It could be blood and guts again. Or it can be, here it is, finally, the story, what goes on in a rapist's mind. And of course, they can't do that, so they do his life. And they show him butchering women and raping women. And people go, ooh, and they'll laugh for the box office. And somebody may even finally say, wait a minute, I know this is sort of sickening and people don't want to talk about it, but my God, we've got to face reality. It's time somebody had the nerve to stand up and make a movie, write a book like this. It's time, yeah. I don't know where those kind of critics have been for the last 5,000 years. But anyway, you've got two possible flavors of literature. One simply details how people are. The other possibility is how they could be. How they could be would be what myths were, in the way I'm using myths now. That myths would be how man could be. But here's how they are dragged down. Here's how they turn from being mystical at one time into being simply fairy tales, religion of no consequence. They are dragged down when they're taken to be, that is the myths, the original myths, when they're taken to be telling of literal events which makes whatever happened in the story, makes it then appear to be involving what men are already. Do I have to ask ourselves rhetorically, did I get that too complicated? If we take a myth, again, I'm just pulling them out, just if we had time, we'd take a vote and I'd use any one you come up with. But how about Moses and the burning bush? Let's assume that was a myth, and I'm not going to say what it might have meant. You could make up your own version. But then, let's assume that it was a myth about what man could be. Because assuming you were staying there in that area of the Middle East, 4,500 years BC or whenever it was, and you were there and you'd already maybe heard about Moses. Anyway, you heard the story about there's this guy that seems to be pretty smart. Let's assume you'd heard his name. And it turns out that he says that he went up on a mountaintop and he was gone for I don't know what, a day or so. And there was some bad storms that night. Do you remember last week? Yeah, I remember that. A lot of bad weather. Well, he came back down and he had this list. And he said that he was up there and that he talked to God. He talked to the universe. The great mystical experience came upon him. He found out what the great secret was again. He rediscovered it. Let's hear it. And so it comes out, well, let's say the 10 Commandments, or whatever it was he came out with, really. Then, it's no longer considered a myth. I don't mean that there's not somebody somewhere that will say, well, that they don't believe in the Bible anyway. But what I'm saying is the mainstream who adopted the story, it is no longer a myth any more than you could take Jesus being crucified to move further away from Orthodox Judaism into Christianity. It's no longer a myth. Let's assume that you were alive at the time and you heard they nailed up that guy. You may have been over there talking and getting everybody upset. Had that cable TV show over in Jerusalem. Yeah. They finally fried that son of a bitch. They nailed him up and killed him. Yeah. But wait a minute. They're saying now he got up. After the state killed him, after they said they didn't like what he was saying and they killed him, a few days later, some people talked to him again. He was back and said, hey, I didn't get through. And he told them something else. And it was taken as a myth. But is it taken as a myth now? Again, we're not talking about offshoot critics of Christianity go, well, I don't believe it anyway. Nah, we're talking about the mainstream now. It is no longer a myth. It is taken as a fact. The subtle part I'm trying to get you to see. Let's go back to Moses a minute. You were staying there at that time and place, and they said that here is what they're talking about. Or you heard that there's a story that says a guy named Moses last week, or sometime that in your lifetime, they're saying, have you heard the latest legend? Have you heard the latest tale? And they talk about a guy that went up, and as a storm went on, he went up a mountain. You can put down, start doing it yourself. You can make up on the spot, even if you didn't know what secret to make as a punchline. But it's a great myth, the great basis of a myth, even without me filling in a punchline. But he goes up on a mountain, away from the people. He goes off and he contemplates, or he does something. He gets in touch with the secret of life. Talks to God. Now all that stuff came later, but he went up and he did something that they couldn't do down there. But look at it as a myth. You can look at it as your own nervous system. That one guy got away from the crowd within him, with all the Philistines, all the people that were worshiping false gods, golden calves, I think the Old Testament says. Golden calves, you can say a guy that was chasing around pussy, food, fame, and fortune, trying to get the most goats there in the tribe. But then he went above the crowd, and went up in himself, going up here and went up and meditated. And somebody got in touch with higher forces in himself and had the experience. It has the basis, as they all do. As I said, I could do it with almost anything. But it had a great basis. It was a myth. And I won't give a punchline, but there was a myth. But look how soon. It was taken literally. And I'm not giving a history again. I don't know how soon. It doesn't even matter. But I assure you within a few years. Especially after he died, there was such a guy. But by the next generation, it was not a myth. Any more than it is now. It is a fact. You may not be a Christian. You might say, well, I don't like it. But that's like saying, well, I don't like the Grimm Brothers fairy tales. I like the ones that those guys wrote down in the late Middle Ages in Italy. You know, so like saying, well, you mean you don't like the Grimm Brothers fairy tales? Yeah, I don't believe in them. You don't like them. Yeah, same thing. So it doesn't matter whether you believe in Judaism and the stories in the Old Testament, but you notice it is now by those who take it seriously. It is not a fable. It is not a myth. It is a fact. There's no problem. That's the way things go. But here's what it does. If you're interested in the great secret, if you're interested in what information has been and remains perhaps in some myths, and again, I'm not using myths like anybody else. I'm just using it as a word because they're alliterated with mud. I could have put fables and flop instead of myths and mud. But at any rate, it's taking that which was informative and turning into literal. It's taking that which was one form of literature, that which is speaking about what man could be, and treating it as a fait accompli. And what it does is drag it back down. That's why I said the mud. It drags it down to where once you're taking it literally, that wait, this happened. What you're saying without knowing it is what you're saying then is, if it happened, then this is no longer a promise about man's future. It's no longer talk about what he is. You're now treating it as though he's already that. It's happened. He went up on the mountain and did it and came back with the word of God. Therefore, I don't have to do anything. I mean, he did it. Why should I do it? Or probably I couldn't do it. It might be sacrilegious. It might be pretentious. I mean, he went and did it. I've always dreamed of it. He did it. Why should I go do it? Plus, he came back down. He didn't try to hide it. He came back down and said, well, I had it. I had the experience. I had to talk to God. And I'm willing to share it with you. Who's interested? Well, me. So then you don't have to do it. You see, that is what happens once a myth is taken to be a fact. It's done more than just say, I'm not just saying that there's some sort of misstep going on. It's not harming anyone to take a myth as a fact. But if you're trying to get something out of the myth, the kind of informative information that could have been inherent regarding man's future, once you take it as a fact, it is no longer that form of literature. It's now into the common form of literature, because if you take it as not fable, not as metaphor, not as symbolism, but as a literal historical fact, then you have treated it as though that's what man is. Therefore, what is it to do? What kind of promise? What kind of hope? What kind of information is there? None. Because you said, well, it's already happened. A myth then ceases, rather than it being what I'm inferring it is, that the real myth, rather than it being an informative, rather than it being a story, rather than it being something that is informative regarding man's possible future, you have now dragged it down to where it's nothing but like a form of whining, an ongoing attempt to justify what man already is. That's what religion turns out being. Without being an attack, I fool around because I know how close it sounds to being some form of criticism, but you can look at all organized religion in one sense, vis-a-vis, not an attack on any particular religion, but vis-a-vis it being an attempted help in directing a man, an individual man, toward a future. Now, I'm not talking about life after death. I'm talking about his individual future now, of him expanding what he understands and what he does. Compared to that, you've got to see that all religion is a kind of attempt at compensatory whining about why we're like this. Well, Adam and Eve made God mad. Or God made us all, decent, and then we, did something wrong. You got those stories everywhere. It is like it's like a continual, ongoing, attempted justifications for what man is. Once you've got that, you no longer have a myth. Put to you another way. And remember, by myth, I mean something worthwhile. I'm talking about the real secret work. I'm not talking about the secret work that you say is a secret work. Because we already established that if you say it's a great secret work, it's no great secret work. It's obviously no great secret anymore because you just said, it's a great secret work. So we got that part. But another way to look at, and I'm using myth as being it was something that had the potential to speak to a man, an individual man, about his potential future. Not life after death, but about him being Moses. His own God, his own mountain, his own bunch of people worshiping cows, golden cows. All of it in him. That's what a real myth is a piece of useful information. But when you take it as literal fact, you have dragged it down literally. You have dragged it down to the point that it no longer has any potency to it, because you're not treating it as food for tomorrow. You're not treating it as though it's a roadmap, some sort of impetus to travel. You're treating it as a deed done. That's already happened. This is what man is. Maybe not me right this second. Maybe I'm not as wise as Moses right this second. But you understand what you have done is establish the fact that it has happened. Therefore, it's a done deed. It's just whether I do it or not. So instead of looking to the future like I'll become Moses, instead of looking here, I know this gets a little tricky. Well, you look to the past. God, if I could just become like Moses was. You can die. You understand? I've been through all that. You can't do that. Well, you can try to do it, but it's a hobby. Because it won't make you change. It doesn't offer anything. It's why people want to grab priests and rabbis sometimes and get serious and say, how come I don't change? Why don't you help me? And they think, well, shit, I don't know. Why don't it help me either? But then they'll say things like, well, they're just not making Jews like Moses anymore. They're just not making us Buddhists, we're just not putting out, Buddhists like Buddha anymore. And you think, well, that makes sense. And you kind of wander on off and go have a drink, because what else are you going to say? There's another what I wanted to slip into you. You are literally taking away any possible individual benefit, any sort of, assuming that all myths had some, I'll put it to you directly, some secret information. Then they all did. And I say secret on the basis that it was not, go back to the Moses story. If I remember my history right, and if I don't, screw it. But, that the people had fallen away from whatever the God at the time was supposed to be, and they were worshiping idols and, fighting over how much, which would be worshiping a statue of a goat or a cow. And that he went up on the mountain. He went up and realized, this is not it. So whatever he came back with at that time was secret information. Secret on the basis that the people down in the valleys, the people back in town, back in the city, doing all the foolish stuff and the rituals, the stuff in your own nervous system, if you're going to get good, back in you, the old uncivilized part. He went above that, and so whatever he found was secret to them. It's obvious, or they'd already known it. So it was secret. Once it is taken as fact, though, there is no longer any possibility of there being individual nourishment in there, because you're now treating it as though it is a literal fait accompli. This already happened. Maybe not to me, but it's happened, and therefore it is not something to strive for. Now, the most they'll strive for, they might deny it. Well, I do work for it. What do? I go to temple. I go to church. I give my money. Yeah, but what do you do? Well, I light candles, and I do without food on certain days. Yeah, but what do you do? And then if you got really good, they'll go, all right, I know what you're saying. I don't do anything because I don't know what to do. What the part I was going to throw into, trying to lead up, that once it's taken as literal fact that it did actually occur, then it is no longer about man's possible future. It is simply it's now literature, it's fiction. It's real life drama. Film noir. It is, well, this is the way life is. Of course, it's supposed to be a little more upbeat than about the chainsaw murders or the life of a rapist. But it's still, you have now taken it as it's already happened. It is not in the future. Therefore, it's got no power. It's got no secret information left. Now, if it has any, you can't see it. All right. Dash. That's what all right means. I'm going to put it to you another way. Something we've been talking about. To turn a myth into a nothing, to turn it into an inefficacious tale, to turn it into a fairy story, turn it into a movie of the week on TV, to turn it into a piece of fiction, even if it becomes classic fiction. So one thing you got to do is you've got to only add an element of criticism to the story. How about, let's get away from religion, how about the great chivalrous tales? All you've got to do to turn all the tales, and I won't try to pick out any, but all the stuff from Northern Europe during that period, the King Arthur tales and all the myths of the troubadours and chivalrous love and fighting for honor and etc. All you got to do to turn those myths, and they were the same, I submit to you, well, I'm going to tell you, they were at the time the same kind of myths as Moses was in the Middle East during his time, and Buddha was, and etc. that those kind of tales were of a particular taste to a particular time and climate. It being Northern Europe during those 12 and 13, 1400s, I guess. But at any rate, all you had to do to turn those myths, to take away any possible information, useful information they had, to turn the myths into mud, all you had to do was add a piece, an element of criticism to the story. To wit, begin to see dragons as being real creatures deserving of attack. For those of you that missed the connection, it's the same thing as later a Moses or a Jesus coming back with some information, some secret, and a little bit later they go, what we got to do is kick the devil's ass. We got to get on Lucifer's case and run him out of town. They begin to take dragons as being real things. See, that was the part I've been dragging this up to for the last 45 minutes, but now I want you to see more. Not only did the myths become real, but now I'm making it specific that dragons, all the stories about all the knights going out on these quests to win a girl's love, to win a maiden's love, to earn a virgin's devotion. Now I won't stop. Those of you who won't think about that, the same way as going up on the mountaintop, getting away from the people, the common peoples, worshiping false gods, is these knights going out on a mystical quest, going out. Moses went to see God, they said later. We got people now accept that. And the same kind of people laugh that Sir Lancelot goes off with a green knight, and this girl says, well, or the king even says, I'll only give you the best I have, the ruler, his daughter, if you go out and slay such and such dragon, or free my son who the dragon has. And people go, dragons. If you were a dragonist, you could hear about the idea of Allah and go, Allah. You got to take, not only it's two stages, and you can't separate them, but you take a dragon. You can fill in your own idea now of God and etc. But you have taken a myth, and I'm taking the heart of some of the myths of Northern Europe at that time as opposed to religious myths. You must take a dragon as being a real creature and deserving of attack. That is the criticism. It gets very subtle. And I say subtle, it's not that you're too stupid to see it, it's just the mind doesn't operate to ever see it. But you take any myth, I'm not going to try to take it completely apart, but take the idea of Moses going up. When he comes back with the 10 Commandments, the way it's told, the way and there seems to be no way out, what's inherent in it? He went up like, I want to get up, I want to go have the experience. Let's say that was the beginning of the myth. So he retires from the ordinary hurly-burly mechanical activity of the city and all the people are doing. That is, you can look at it another way, what he already knew. Why should I stay here and keep thinking about the stuff I've already thought about? Why should I keep running in circles? Why can't I keep trying to pursue the same lines of inquiry? They call it later, why should I keep trying to worship and follow false gods? Now they take it literally. But a false god is, well, hell, I've already thought that. It didn't help me. Or if it helped me, it doesn't help me anymore. I chewed it up and I keep eating, what I vomit. I keep, so I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go somewhere. So the myth starts. He retires. He takes himself away from all the ordinary affairs. He goes up on the mountain. Up until then, the myth's all right. Then even the speculations that they hear loud noises, thunder, unusual times. He stays up there longer than expected. What in the hell is he doing up there? We've been on that mountain before. We can see it from here. There's nothing up there. Where is he? What's going on? It's still all right. Then he comes down. Then the element of criticism is added. He comes down at first. Now, I know I'm playing with all this, and I'm moving time. I'm changing. I'm playing with an anastrosicity. Don't write me about that one. In a way that's, I know. He comes back down, and what's he got? The 10 Commandments, which all start out about what, or have to do with what? Criticism. Thou shalt not. Well, the whole thing's criticism. Now, it doesn't matter what. You understand? There's the critical element. But let's say what I was going to say is I'm playing with this in 4 or 5 different ways, but Moses goes up, the myth's all right, he has the experiences all right, they see him coming down, which would be actually, if you're getting back to the individual, Moses sees himself coming down, that he can't stay in the experience. That he's being dragged back to the city, he's beginning to feel like himself, think the same stuff again, he knows he's coming back down. He knows he's about to fall back in the hands of who? Satan? No. Moses! Myself. So he knows he's coming back down, but the myth's still all right. The myth is still, he's still got hold of it. He knows, well, I'm coming down, but I'm all right. What I've seen now, this is what I've been waiting for. But when he gets down and he's got the 10 Commandments, now I know I've played it out in 2 or 3 directions. What are the 10 Commandments? It is the element of criticism. And once you've done that, you have turned the myth, you have dragged it absolutely back to earth. You've turned the myth into mud. Because once you put in the element of criticism, and what I was saying is subtle, all fables, that's what morals are to every fable. That's what the punchline is. That is what life after death, the dream of that, when it gets into religion. But once you put an element of criticism to a myth, that is to what was originally the secret work, of whatever time and place. I don't mean there's just been one, but the secret work at any time and place. Once you put in the element of criticism, even if they knew something, that they were originally a living myth of some kind, that they were somebody in there had the experience, somebody could see over the horizon and knew what man's future was, which is all the mystical experience is, to see where we're plugged in, but to see that you've got to see 2 feet ahead of you and no one else can. Or you can under ordinary conditions, as you know. That's why you keep looking around to people, help me, I can't see. And they go, well, hell, I can't either, let go of me. Once you add an element of criticism, even if you see something, you're done for. It's gone. Which is, you do have let's say the experience and you turn and you can see. And then somebody says, wait a minute, tell me what you see, or they say, wait a minute, I think I've seen that before, and you turn around, and no matter what you say, if you think, well, you dumb son of a bitch, your myth is now mud. You've now written your own 10 Commandments. Or if you're there, and you had the audacity, the stupidity to say something about the experience to somebody, and they went, I don't know, I read something like that before. And in some way, in your own sweet way, you think, you dumb son of a bitch. Then whatever it was that you saw, whatever it was that God said you on the mountaintop when you were Moses, you can forget it. Well, I'm not. Point is, the myth no longer has any power whatsoever. It no longer has any, quote, secret information. Well, all you got to do is add any element of criticism to a myth, to secret information, to a mystical experience. Which, once you see it, is why, another way to look at it, that all cults, that all factions, that all reform movements of some religion, that is, that ordinary secret groups, secret work groups of people involved in some great secret work, are always, well, I say always, find out if, are they reacting to something? And if they go, well, yeah. Do you understand? It's why any known secret group still doesn't have what you're looking for, because if they're a known secret group, back up 50 minutes ago when we started this, they are tacitly criticizing, saying, well, we're the secret group because used to I was part of the Catholic Church. I was part of the Greek Orthodox Church. I used to be an avid Buddhist until I found out so-and-so, that they'd lost the secret, they lost the way. Now, my little group of followers and I, we have it. As long as you got a criticism, any kind, doesn't matter how well founded, as long as there's a critical element, you no longer have a myth. That is, you no longer have any useful information regarding man's possible future. All you've got is a whining, attempted to compensate and explain why you're in the shitty position you are now. That's all you've got, which is in essence what religion ends up being. An excuse to whine. Well, I know it always seems well-founded. Well, it's not our fault, but we made God mad. Or it's a test. Or it's a test. God put us here to see how much of this crap up with. But it's always a whine. It's always a looking back. And myths, I'm suggesting to you for a purpose, for any of you who won't go back and read, because you can still go back and read a myth that's 2,000 years old and get that out of it, which they didn't get 1,995 years after that, or before you. Or much less anybody now, an expert, the world's leading expert on 3,000-year-old myths. Once you understand it, you might be able to get something out of it. But you've got to understand this, that it has nothing to do with fact. That is, it has nothing to do with things that, quote, actually happen. Because if they actually happen, you have dragged the myth so far down now that there's nothing left. Because if you actually believe, if you stand and try to look at it, and I say believe, you shouldn't even be fooling with it. It's irrelevant. If you look back, if you started trying to read the Old Testament, let's say, and you begin to debate, well, now, could this happen? Is this part myth or is this part actual? Are they being metaphorical now? Or now have they jumped back now to actual fact? Forget it. It's not that you have to sit there and worry about it. It's if you know how to do it, it's irrelevant. And if you think it's just applied to religion, that'd be the same thing as reading Gulliver's Travels and go, is there any chance that this could have actually happened? Now, I know you go, wait, that's silly. Well, it's no more silly than saying, wait a minute, I wonder if Moses actually went up on a mountaintop. Could that be metaphorical? And you go, well, certainly could be metaphorical. All right, if that literal thing could be metaphorical, if they say it literally happened, but they say it does also could be metaphorical, then how come something that's obviously metaphorical about this big old guy that goes over there and he falls into the hands of these little bitty people? Are these little bitty people anything like the middle class? Are they anything like Jews that used to worship golden calves way back? Oh, no, that couldn't be them. I'm sorry, I got confused. Anyway, it's obviously fiction, right? This ordinary guy named Gulliver, first name I won't go into, it was Leroy, but not many people know that, that he falls into the hands of these little bitty people, and they almost destroy him. Individually, he could have stomped each one of them, but suddenly, he let himself weaken, took a nap, they drugged him or something, and he woke up, and all these little teeny things. Are these little teeny things anything like my little teeny ideas that I have when I live down the valley of everybody else? No, wait a minute, that couldn't actually have happened. All right, if real things could be metaphors, how come metaphors couldn't be real things? Does anybody see why I started tonight? And I was going to respond to, I know that people say, well, exactly what is this? What's this kind of stuff? Well, why don't you just put a name or why don't you reveal what it is? I just did. Glad I could be of service. Or as I would have said to Leroy, were he here, proud to have been able to help you out.